All right, hi everybody. Welcome to this month's episode of Cronin's Corner. Thank you for being here today. It feels like we're getting out of winter and moving into the spring. I'm excited to be joined by this month's guest, Brian Scales, who is the president and CEO of RCAP Solutions. So Brian, thank you very much for being here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we've got a busy show today. We're going to start by, I hope, talking a little bit about the housing crisis, where we got where we are today, how we might get out of it, and then how RCAP Solution exists and what the mission of your organization is to kind of meet the challenges that we see in North Central Mass.
Sure.
But before we get to that, can you introduce yourself to viewers?
Sure. Be happy to.
Great.
So I was born on an Army base outside of Washington, D.C. My father was career Army. We moved also to Alaska, spent some time there. And then his last duty station was Fort Devens.
Gotcha.
They were originally from Massachusetts. So I made it to high school here. And graduated from St. Bernard's, and then went to college in Florida and Cambridge University in England.
Gotcha.
Made my way back here, and now I'm the president and CEO of RCAP Solutions.
So I think you were at least the second or third guest on the show whose family ended up in the area in North Central because of Fort Devens, to include my own. Mm-hmm. I think Danette Day also, same story. So it's good to have another Army family sticking around. But to kind of pivot and to get into the meat of today's show.
Sure.
To you, how do you understand the housing crisis that we're experiencing really at every level here in North Central Mass and across the state right now?
So there are a lot of different levels of this, and I think the first comparison would be the foreclosure crisis that we had in the late 2008, 2009, when I was actually just starting at RCAP. And then we would see a lot of people coming in typically who would not be seeking assistance. So we saw that, but this was obviously on a global scale that we got into. We saw people that we would never see, people who didn't know how to navigate the process. There were a lot of people who didn't know what to do. And then we had the challenges of having to train new people as we got them into the organization to handle the cases. And also working remotely. So it was compounded by the sheer volume of people.
Can you give me a sense of how, at the onset of the pandemic, RCAP had to scale in terms of delivery of the services you provide?
So like everybody else, we were sort of trying to figure out as we went along, do we need to be in the office? Do we need to rotate?
Yep.
Do we need to staff up? So then we got our leads from the state, from DHCD specifically, who is our chief funder in the housing arena. To expand some of these programs. So it was a gradual expansion of who could be eligible for things, how much they could be eligible for. Nobody was prepared for this. I keep telling people that the RAF program initially in dealing with the pandemic was like fighting a forest fire with a garden hose.
Yeah.
It just wasn't designed for that kind of activity. So, we figured out ways of, first of all, that people could work remotely safely and how they could process applications. And the state had a central portal where they could take applications, then ferry them out to the different RAAs, which are the regional housing authorities that we're a part of. So the scale was just enormous. It continues to maintain a very high level right now. But, we have a lot more people who are trained now, experienced now, and dealing with people either remotely and occasionally we do some in-person sort of things. But nobody could have foreseen the vast numbers. I think next to filing unemployment claims, the housing crisis was the biggest thing that we all had to deal with.
And nobody had the capacity to deal with the amount of people who needed help and needed services to stay in their homes.
Correct.
Right?
Because the programs that we originally had pre-pandemic are basically designed to prevent homelessness.
Right.
They're for sustainability. So if, let's say, you get a hiccup in your pay and you have to catch up, maybe you're a contractor, you break an arm and you can't work for a while, and you qualify, but you're back at work, so that these programs would help pay your back bills and get you back on the track to being fully recovered. But during the pandemic, all bets were off. We were putting out, I think, still case in point, the last 6 months in Central Mass, we've put out almost $25 million in assistance for rentals, individuals. And prior to the pandemic, our allotment was somewhere around $6 million for the year.
Right.
So there's a lot of money going through. a lot of money that we had to process and learn how to process. And, we're still seeing a large number of applications.
And it's kind of tough for even myself to go back to January or February 2020 at the onset of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we almost forget. I was at a meeting this morning and somebody, referenced January 2020 and the onset of the pandemic. And, I said, that was 10 years ago, right? It feels there's a lot of life that has happened for everybody in between then.
Yeah.
And I guess the point is, so many people had the carpet pulled out from under them.
Sure.
We lost hundreds of thousands of jobs here in the Commonwealth almost overnight. From your view right now, have we recovered from that kind of that disruption, or are we still working our way through it?
I think we're still working our way through it. Interestingly enough, right now, the state is transitioning out of the previous versions of the assistance and strictly going to raft. So when this program airs, there'll be no more ENRA or IRMA. It'll only strictly be raft. I have a feeling, if when I'm talking to my staff, is that currently right now people know that certain benefits are going to be sunsetting. So they want to get those applications in beforehand.
Gotcha.
So we're still seeing the same numbers as we had the previous 6 months or so. But I have a feeling the next 6 months will start to work their way down, and there'll be less and less requests.
And it's almost cliche at this point, and I kind of wince every time I hear it now, but the problems we had before the pandemic were exacerbated by COVID-19 and kind of laid bare for us all to deal with. And hopefully, to say there's a little bit of a silver lining, we can see some of these systemic issues that existed before, but we can, take a deliberate approach. For me, it's to increase every type of housing in the Commonwealth. And, here in North Central, we've got an aging housing stock. We don't have enough supply. Demand is through the roof. I think real estate year over year is up more than 20%. It's pricing out a lot of people who are first-time home buyers. It's pricing out people who are living week to week and paycheck to paycheck, especially as we're feeling the inflation. So do you think, how is RCAP responding to those things too? And what are the solutions beyond RCAP that you think the legislature and local communities need to take a serious look at to increase supply and to make sure we get out of where we are right now?
So supply is a huge issue right now, obviously. In addition to our homelessness prevention, we also are the administrator for the housing rental voucher programs in Central Mass. And what those do allow people to find their own place, and then the state will pay a portion of their rent, and they pay in a portion of their rent.
Gotcha.
The qualifications for those are that we have to do a quality control check. We have inspectors that go make sure the house is safe, there's no mold, et cetera, et cetera. So, we're trying to integrate more housing search people for us to have people have some options. So we're trying our best to try to make more outroads into getting more landlords on our rolls to have people have access to them.
Capacity building as an organization.
Correct. Yeah. Outreach, capacity building, communication, reaching out to landlords and saying, hey, you've got these units. Do you have any additional units? Because it's advantageous for them too. They know that they're going to get a check from RCAP, as we funnel it from the state and the taxpayers. That's a guaranteed thing. And as far as the state and developers, we need new housing stock.
Yeah.
We need an affordable rental market. Right now, landlords can charge what they can charge right now, and we have to abide by fair market rents. And those go back pre-pandemic as far as how they're allocated and figured out the equation. So it's a difficult time right now. It's a very, very tight rental market. And we cannot and will not put somebody with a voucher into a substandard unit because we're not allowed to. And we don't want people to get hurt. A lot of these folks have children.
I think one of the most difficult things for legislators and policymakers to grapple with, especially where we are, is how do you spur more production? The market and the demand is here. We have new buildings that open up and come online, and they're full faster than you can say Jack Robinson.
That's right.
But the cost to build new housing stock is so prohibitive, more prohibitive than it's ever been. We had a a meeting and a tour with a number of big developers, and we brought them through North Central and Fitchburg. And the cost for a single, 2-bed, 2-bath, what it costs developers to build and put a new unit online has risen, almost 100% in the past 5 or 10 years.
Yep.
From $250,000 to closer to $4. So if you're a developer and you've got private investment, it makes sense. They're looking east, unfortunately,
Yeah.
where the numbers and the margins make sense for them. And I think what's incumbent upon the legislature to do is say, okay, how do we spread out the housing stock, and how do we spur private investment? I know one of my top priorities in the legislature and the Senate this year is the HDIP program, or the Housing Development Incentive Program, which targets gateway cities, and it provides a public subsidy and tax credit to leverage private investment.
Right.
And we've seen it work here in Fitchburg and Leominster, and that's a story that we need to continue to tell. But the first new private construction housing project on Main Street in Fitchburg, and I think my lifetime happened, Pelletier Properties, because of the HDIP program. And
Right.
the margins wouldn't have. So it's kind of that deliberate approach that, again, as we emerge from the pandemic, I think we can see programs at the state level that are working and double down to kind of not just sustain them, but really expand them to address the crisis that we're seeing right now. So we've got kind of in the weeds a little bit on RAF, but
Yep.
could we take a step back, Brian, and
Sure.
could you describe to me what RCAP is, what the mission is, and,
Sure.
and kind of the history of the organization?
So we've been around a while. 1969 is when we were founded. We were the Regional Housing Improvement, RHI at the time, out
Gotcha.
of Winchendon, and developed over the years. So first we started out basically with a USDA program that it was almost, I equate it to like a Habitat for Humanity. It was building self-help homes in North Central Mass. And I think last I looked and read, there was over 400 homes that are still standing that RHI helped build. Yeah. And then we got into the rental assistance and homelessness prevention. In 1978, President Carter, part of his platform was to build rural America. So we became part of the Rural Water Demonstration Program. We are the Northeast. And basically, RCAP, in addition to housing, we also provide technical assistance around water and wastewater. Our territory now consists of all of New England, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico, and
You
USVI.
guys are not a mom and pop shop anymore,
No,
right?
No,
Yeah.
we haven't been for a long time. I mean, I have staff in Puerto Rico. We work in USVI. Before you ask, I haven't been on a business trip there.
You're due. Yeah, you're due.
I'm due. Yeah. Post-pandemic. So we've leveraged last year over $50 million in funding. So we don't necessarily put the pipes in the ground, but what we do is we have experienced people who talk to boards in rural communities, small wastewater systems, and provide them the technical assistance, either to get in compliance or to grow or to provide managerial or financial assistance too. So
Gotcha.
we also have 11 properties in North Central Mass, either elderly housing or family housing or disabled housing. And we also have a program called our Home Modification Loan Program, which is a small program but very effective. And what that does is allow people who maybe have an aging parent in their house who need either bathroom accessibility or things of that nature. It provides low-cost loans so they can do the construction and stay in their homes.
Gotcha. So to kind of deep dive into some of the programs that you administer, I know we in the legislature a couple weeks ago in March in our supplemental budget allocated another $100 million to the RAF program.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned before, you've put tens of millions of dollars of raft assistance into central Massachusetts to keep people in their homes. Who's eligible for that program? What does that program do? And why is it a good investment for the state to continue to fund?
So the way that it currently does is that you can get up to the way that it's written, and it's changing rapidly.
Okay.
So it's moving back to pre-pandemic standards. So the first thing I would say is that for anyone, we are stewards of the taxpayers' funds, and we're very cognizant of that. So we make sure that what we do adheres to all of the restrictions and guidelines. The RAF program in particular can provide up to $7,000 in assistance, up to, based on qualifications. And that can go for first and last. It can go for arrears. Basically, it is a prevention model from prevention of homelessness.
Gotcha.
But the key thing now moving forward is that sustainability too. So during the pandemic, because so many people were hurting, there wasn't that, as I spoke of before, that essence of, well, if you get this 7,000 and you can get back on your feet and sustain yourself, then you're good to go. So now moving forward, if you qualify for the funding, but you're still going to be behind or face eviction because you need $20,000, then they're going to not be allowed to get the $7,000.
Gotcha.
So what we have at RCAP and what the other regional housing authorities is called the HCEC, and that's the Housing Consumer Education Center. And I equate that to almost like an urgent care. So no matter what your housing issue is, the state funds this program where you can have someone sit down with you, talk to you, decide what may be some of the best avenues for you to move forward on. Some of them may be within RCAP and some of our programs like RAFT, or we might do referrals to other organizations who have different types of programs and funding. But it's always the best step if you have any kind of housing issue is to reach out to our HCEC.
And I think that was the first interaction that we had. It was on a
Yes.
Zoom right after maybe I had been elected.
Yep.
And Representative Higgins, who is a rock star on housing specifically, she gave me some really good advice. If you have a housing issue, call Brian. So I don't know if we get to call you direct anymore as the new CEO, but it's kind of one-stop shop, right? And it's triage for whatever issue you're facing.
Correct, yeah. I've always had that position. I don't think right now we're going to change anything just because I think the most important thing is I think when people reach out to you and your staff, they're at an extremely critical phase.
Right.
And that I can have eyes on things and sort of guide, through the process and get responses or other sorts of things. But yeah, it's been a long 2 years, and we're not out of it yet by any measure, but we'll keep moving forward.
What about the Mass Homeowner Assistance Program? That's another thing that RCAP helps administer. Who's eligible for that, and what does that do?
So some of the times, I don't know all of the qualifications, but if you call the HCEC, they will facilitate any kind of questions that they can see what kind of assistance you can be granted or where the best things might be going. Oftentimes, if somebody reaches out to me directly, I tend not to engage with them because I will ask all the wrong questions or somebody else will ask questions later on. So we have a bunch of different, I wouldn't say they're boutique, but they're smaller programs
Gotcha.
that can fit in with other individuals and specific needs, be they veterans, families, things of that nature. So I always say the best thing to do is to contact our HCEC, speak to one of our trained professionals. They'll elicit, well, this might work for you, that might work for you, and then we'll get the process rolling.
And just to, kind of to put a point on one more element of RAFT, why is it a good public investment to keep people in their homes? And why is this, RAFT is a bridge program essentially, right?
Yep.
Why is that a good deal? Or why should that continue to be funded by the taxpayer?
The best answer for that is because it is a lot more expensive once somebody becomes homeless in a shelter to rehouse them than to keep them in where they are.
Right.
This program, as I said before, is all about sustainability. So this assists people in either maintaining their current residence or getting into a new residence where they can get back on their feet, they can get back to work, they can do everything that they need to do to live a full life. This isn't throwing bad money after...
At bad...
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the key to this, is that there are a lot of restrictions as far as being in place where this is to keep people housed, but yet we're not going to overpay, or this isn't going to be like, well, what's going to happen 6 months from now?
And I find those are the programs or the arguments that are easiest to rally support around. Right. Not only is it doing a lot of good, keeping people, the kids in the same school system, people housed, people so they can go to work, but it's also a lot less expensive than the alternative, than them on the street with nowhere to go.
Right.
And frankly, at the back of the line to get new housing.
Correct.
Okay, so I appreciate that. That's raft. Can we kind of pivot a little bit now? And you mentioned how RCAP is also involved in some water testing.
Yep.
Can you talk about the private well program that you've established with the Health Foundation of Central Mass?
Love to. So about 3 years ago, we approached the Central Mass Health Foundation to apply for a grant. And they said, well, this is a big deal. You should apply for the Synergy grant, which is a multi-year grant. It's 5 years. And what we had done is that we do get some money from EPA on private wells, but it's fairly restrictive. So private wells would be small connections for individuals who have obviously a well, don't get city water or things of that nature. Right now in Massachusetts, there are no guidelines covering testing of private wells across the state.
It's the Wild West a little
Yeah,
bit.
it
still,
is, because particular towns or boards of health will have them,
Yeah.
but others don't even know if they're on the books or not. And we found that as we went forward. So 3 years ago, we got granted the Synergy grant from the Central Mass Health Foundation. And what it is intended to do is the first year we basically had a pilot phase where we tested in North Central. We did 240 tests, and we came back with about 30% of the wells we tested had some sort of health issue, which is enormous. It's not, some of them weren't critical health issues, but 30% exceeded state guidelines, either primary or secondary. Currently, the next phase, we're branching it out into different areas of the Commonwealth to do some additional testing to gather the data. The legislation has been filed. It was a late file in December. It had a committee hearing. Senator Eldridge and Representative Sina, and you co-sponsored. Thank you very much. The legislation to move forward. And basically what the legislation does, it just enables Mass DEP to go through the process of saying, we believe this is the best way to test private wells, be it on a point of sale of your home or something like that. We don't want to dictate what those regulations are.
Or create an unfunded mandate
Correct.
as well, right?
Exactly. We don't want to throw out there that all of a sudden there's going to be deficits and people are going to have
Don't
to pay.
drink your water, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it's basically modeled on the Title V, how that initiated, and that's been highly successful. That's been in place since the 90s. So we're looking to move that forward, get that legislation in place, and so that people can find out what's in their well water.
And when you say that 30% of the wells that you tested had health issues, in plain English, what do you mean?
So what we tested for were what I call, just for the sake of nomenclature, is naturally occurring contaminants. So we were testing for arsenic, radon, things that would naturally occur. I think a lot of people have heard recently about PFAS and other man-made chemicals that are coming and popping up all over the place.
And what is PFAS? Because I'll tell you, before I took this job, I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it before. But it's a carcinogen, right?
Essentially it is. It's a man-made chemical that we had basically in everything for the past 30, 40 years. You'd find it in non-stick pans. You'd find it in Glide dental floss, firefighting equipment, firefighting foam. So what happened was it's basically a man-made chemical that has leached its way into the groundwater and has posed, they don't even know how much, and I say they, I mean the country doesn't know how pervasive it is in all of the groundwater, and we're finding it in places we didn't think we'd find it and not finding it in other places. So our private well program focuses more on the naturally occurring things like your arsenic and things of that nature. Also things like chlorine or high pH value and things of that. So hopefully, as you probably know, there's a PFAS task force that's out right now.
Kate Hogan is a huge leader.
She
right?
is, yep. She's been involved with our program too on the private well. So, you know, eventually we're hoping there's some synergy that, you know, when they pass restrictions on PFAS and testing of that nature, that the private wells are also included for both naturally and the PFAS.
That leads me to kind of my next question. So RCAP has been involved in the private well testing, the 240 wells. It's been involved in crafting and advocating for the legislation for private well testing. What's RCAP's role moving forward going to be in this space?
In the private well space?
Yes.
Well, this year, in the short term, we're going to, as I said, branch out into different areas of the Commonwealth so that we have a larger data set to say it's not just an issue in North Central Mass, but it's an issue across the Commonwealth. We're also going to be looking to push forward on legislation. Part of our leadership team that we have working with this includes people like realtors, health agencies. So we have interested, invested parties, both sides, as we don't want to, force and not recognize that, if it is on point of sale, does it really impact sale of houses?
Yep.
We'd be one of 5 states, if it did pass, that had private well regulations. New Jersey's has probably the longest standing one, and they have not seen any impact on sale of houses. So we're going to be advocating to push this forward. We're going to be increasing our testing amounts and just getting the word out in the short term. But there's also the case for what do we do if somebody finds it? Let's say it's somebody that's been in their house for 30 years and is retired. How do they get the filtration systems and things of that nature when they can't really afford it? So we're looking at also possibly some financial loan funds to develop within the state to grant to people who may not have the capacity to rectify their situation.
Gotcha. Thank you. And so as we move towards kind of the end of the half hour here, as the interim chief executive officer of RCAP, you've got a huge range of responsibilities and a huge organization with different kind of lines of areas that you're involved in. Where would you like to see RCAP double down? Where would you like to see the organization move in the future? And what do you expect its role is going to be in North Central?
I think we're just going to continue to expand in North Central. My priorities as the president and CEO will be basically to consider our internal staff. I mean, we've been pressed and hitting the gas for 2 years, as you can imagine. I'd like to get some, professional development for them, some more communication, because we have been in and out of the office. And I'll be honest, I've been, as much as I've been in the office, I don't know all the faces.
Yeah.
Because, people work remotely, they're in at different times, we're on separate floors. We try to restrict movement around to different offices just to be safe. So one is to stabilize the staff moving forward, expand some of our programmatic work. We just started a new Open for Business program that we're providing counseling to small businesses free of charge, looking to expand that as well in the future. So yeah, there's a lot that's on the table. There's a lot I want to do, and it's an exciting time. And
so for somebody watching right now at home, what can RCAP help with, and to manage expectations? What are things that necessarily RCAP can't help with?
So, especially on the housing side, I think that people can look at our website. They can see what kind of programs we offer. They can put in a phone call if they have housing issues to that HCEC. And as I said, if we can't help you, we may know somebody who can. So the expectation still is that I just want people to know that there's still a large number of applications for assisting people, that this is not a quick and easy process. If they do submit an application, try to get as much paperwork as asked for into the bid, because it goes a lot faster with complete applications, obviously. And, we try to move as quickly as we can, but, there are, 6 months and we've done $26 million, so 25, 26 million, somewhere in that neighborhood.
So you're moving.
We're moving.
Right.
But that also speaks to the volume of people that we've needed to assist in Central Mass alone.
And how do people reach out and connect with RCAP?
There's an 800 number on our website.
And we'll flash that on the screen too.
RCAPsolutions.org is our website, and it leads you to the different areas that we do work in. And we're happy to talk and converse with anybody who needs assistance.
Very good. Well, Brian, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. I want to thank you and your organization for all the work and services you provided to North Central, especially over the past 2 years and during the pandemic, and look forward to all the great work you're going to do as CEO. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody, that's our show for this month, and we'll look forward to seeing you in warm May weather, maybe, or something.
There you go.